Welcome to the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society virtual event series. My name is Steve Barnett, and I'm president of the Scholarship Society. I'm also a past Rolex Scholar. Thank you for joining us today. We have a lot to be excited about as we emerge from our COVID hiatus. A little over a year ago, the Scholarship Society put all scholarship and internship activities on hold due to the pandemic. And while I wish we could gather our society family together in New York City, I'm happy that we can at least get together virtually. Over the next couple of days, we will celebrate our returning 2019 scholars and interns, as well as introduce our new 2021 class as they prepare to head out into the world. With so much to be covered, we split the virtual event into 3 days. The first 2 days will be our Scholar and Intern Symposiums. For those of you who have joined us in New York in the past, this is similar to our Saturday morning event. Today we will hear from our returning 2019 scholars, and tomorrow's event will feature our 2019 interns. These presentations are a terrific opportunity to learn a bit more in depth about what the recipients did during their scholarship and internship experiences. Our awards ceremony will be on the third day of the event. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. We will hold the world premieres of the year-end films for our 3 2019 Rolex Scholars. Our good friends at Divers Alert Network will announce the Dan Rolex Diver of the Year. I'll introduce the new 2021 class of Society interns, and then we will have the awards presentation of the new 2021 Rolex Scholars. I can't wait. Let's get started. Our first presenter today is Neha Acharya-Patel, our 2019 North American Rolex Scholar.
Hello, everybody watching. I am Neha Acharya-Patel, the 2019 North American Rolex Scholar of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. I wish we could all be together right now, but instead you can grab a coffee or a beer and listen to me talk about my scholarship year that was now all the way back in 2019. The time between receiving the scholarship and the beginning of my year in April flew by. Before I knew it, I was on my way to New York for that very memorable inaugural weekend. It was my first time in the Big Apple, and it was also my first introduction to the truly caring nature of the OWUSS family. Over the course of my scholarship year, I was shown again and again how this group of incredibly inspirational people are a truly caring global family. So it is my honor to be speaking with you today about my journey. But first, a little background about myself. I'm from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, but I moved to the west coast of Canada to Vancouver in 2013 to pursue a degree in marine biology at the University of British Columbia. I did my undergraduate thesis in animal physiology studying shark hearts, which resulted in my first academic publication and was a great introduction for me into the world of research and science. I was also lucky enough to do my scientific diving training through school, which has then facilitated so many opportunities in my life. In fact, in the early days of my scientific diving work, I met the 2015 North American Rolex Scholar Michelle Felberg at a research station, and that is actually how I found out about the scholarship. Following graduation, I then worked as a scientific diver and dive master at the Maru Research Station in the Great African Lakes of Malawi. Here, I joined a group studying the fascinating cichlid fish, which are a very cool type of fish if you're trying to understand evolution. This experience was extremely valuable for me as it allowed me to experience the disparity that exists between idealism and realism when trying to understand conservation in a context where long-term thinking is not always possible. This theme was one that was important to me to address during my scholarship year, and I will touch on that a bit more in a minute. Following this, I then worked as a scientific diver and research technician at the Hakai Research Institute on the central coast of British Columbia, studying coastal ecosystems in the context of the Anthropocene. This job increased my confidence in the field exponentially, and many of the skills that I learned proved extremely useful to me as I embarked upon my scholarship year. As I have a broad range of scientific and conservation-related interests, I was hoping to use the scholarship year to explore them. So this brings me to the goals that I had. First was to build effective scientific communication skills. As someone with a background in science, it was becoming increasingly clear to me that in order to enhance the general population's understanding of science, communication was key. As I mentioned before, working in Malawi made me interested about learning about different challenges faced in conservation based on specific cultural nuances. So my second goal for the year was to focus on marine conservation initiatives that kept cultural context in mind. Third, as it is a diving scholarship, I wanted to do some training that could tangibly improve my subtitle skill set. And finally, I wanted to use the international platform that the scholarship provided to meet different researchers and explore different facets of marine science that could potentially shape my path for the future. So let's talk about communication. One of the responsibilities I had as a scholar was to write blogs for OWUSS and other publications to share the work that we are doing throughout the year. It was also a great way to show my hosts how much I valued their time, as well as giving them a tangible takeaway for helping me. As the first Canadian scholar, I wrote a couple pieces for the Canadian Geographic magazine, and I wrote for the Arctic Research Foundation about the work that I did with them, which I will tell you a bit more about later. Over the year, I ended up writing 15 blogs, and I found it easier and easier to share my thoughts and feelings every time I wrote. These skills are so valuable, and I've already taken advantage of them since. A huge part of effective communication, of course, is the imagery. As the old adage goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. However, I came into the scholarship as a totally novice photographer. I was very intimidated by all the gear and knowledge that goes into making a beautiful image. Luckily, Sarah Shoemaker-Lind, the 1999 Rolex Scholar, hosted me for a couple of weeks to help me familiarize myself with the gear. And then Marty Snyderman, an incredibly accomplished underwater photographer, invited me to join him and a whole group of talented image makers for a trip to the Atlantis dive resorts in the Philippines for a couple of weeks of diving in the muck and coral reefs in the center of the Coral Triangle. This opportunity turned into the best way for me to learn about underwater photography. I was surrounded by a group of talented individuals who each helped me so much and gave me a great base that I improved upon for the entire year. Some of my favorite photos of the Philippines, I have up here a mimic octopus, which can mimic up to 8 different types of animals. And right below it, we have the blue-ringed octopus, which is arguably the animal that sparked my love for marine science, as well as being one of the most venomous animals in the sea. Beside it, it's really difficult to see. I have a photo of a pygmy seahorse. And this was a really difficult photograph for me to capture as I was just learning about focus and depth of field. And it was a great way to practice in situ. Finally, on the right-hand side, this is one of my favorite photographs from the year, and it is of sexy shrimp. And these shrimp are called that because they wave their little butts in the air, and they are definitely the sexiest shrimp I've ever seen. As a primarily temperate diver, I was also really excited that I got to dive in the temperate regions in the Southern Hemisphere at the Poor Knights Marine Reserves in New Zealand. And as you can see, it did not disappoint. The kelps, corallines, and sponges you can see on the left side of the screen reminded me so much of my home in British Columbia, and the dramatic volcanic dive sites made for some great wide-angle photographs. On the top right-hand side, I found this pair of nudibranchs on a dive. They're called Alkenia atkinsonorum. And it was only after we got out of the water that we realized that it was actually the first record that they had of this species in the area. And interestingly, it is a bryozoan-eating nudibranch, which you can tell as they are sitting on a huge colony of encrusting bryozoans munching away. Right on the bottom, this type of fish is called a triple fin, and I thought they were super cute, especially with their large blue eyes. And it was only after the dive that I learned that they are aptly named the blue-eyed triple fin. And like the iconic kiwi bird, they are endemic or only found in New Zealand. Arguably, though, the most important when it comes to communication is the ability to talk to people from many different backgrounds. Honestly, this is one of the greatest gifts that the scholarship has given me. Over the year, I have met so many incredible people from such different backgrounds and have felt my confidence and comfort speaking with many people grow exponentially. These are invaluable skills that I know I will be using for the rest of my life. The second theme of my year was to work with projects that were focused on marine conservation. One of the most innovative groups I worked with was the Coral Restoration Foundation based out of the Florida Keys. For those of you that don't know, Florida has lost 70% of their coral reefs in the last 30 years due to sedimentation and warming. The CRF has huge coral nurseries where they grow reef-building baby corals on these coral trees, which you can see me cleaning. These babies are subsequently harvested and outplanted on degraded reef sites. The CRF has actually begun to see huge recovery, and their nursery corals have reproduced in the wild, which is a huge conservation success. This was one of the most tangible and impressive coral restoration efforts I have seen. And I was lucky enough to spend World Oceans Day in 2019 with them at the world's largest outplanting site, where over 2,000 baby corals were placed on reef sites. After sharing my desire to learn about marine protection with the society, the 1980 Rolex Scholars Stacy Tai invited me to Raja Ampat, Indonesia, to learn about management and the tourism-based challenges they face. Raja Ampat is extremely important in terms of global biodiversity, so it is vital to manage it effectively. The challenges they are facing are largely due to the increase in visitor traffic and illegal fishers coming in from other countries. Learning about their management struggles was illuminating. Though ecotourism has been a huge driving force for global conservation, talking with the local park service made me realize that the needs of local communities that should be prioritized are often swept under the rug because of the more lucrative promises of tourism. As an extension to this, the reefs there are very susceptible to damage from boats and divers, so conservation and restoration efforts have to be designed with these specific challenges in mind. While I was there, I also joined an NGO that was trying to address this problem by building reef stabilizing structures with the local communities. This experience again hammered home the importance of having conservation strategies that are specific to the needs of the local communities. Situations are often so much more complex than we think. This is a perfect segue to my time working with Comunidad y Biodiversidad, or COBI, in Mexico. This NGO works all over the country, but I joined their Baja California chapter to go on a road trip to visit the fishing communities on the west coast of the Vizcaíno Peninsula. What impressed me so much about them was the collaboration between scientists, COBI, and the fishers themselves. We went to collect and reinstall oxygen and temperature sensors to download data from all the fishing cooperatives. This data is immediately shared with the fishers, who can use it autonomously to decide how they would adjust their quotas in real time. This lack of bureaucracy and scientific understanding resulted in some of the most sustainable fisheries I've ever seen. In addition to this, COBI works with the communities with a focus on women to train them as divers to conduct ecological monitoring of their fishing areas. As a traditionally male-dominated occupation, it was refreshing to dive with women whose livelihoods are so deeply intertwined with the sea. I learned so much on this trip about what can be possible with collaboration and cooperation. On the theme of collaboration, citizen science expeditions are another cool way where cooperation between scientists and tourism operators in this case can result in positive outcomes for marine ecosystems. Dora Sandoval runs citizen science expeditions to the Revillagigedo archipelago. I joined them for a trip to tag sharks and take tissue samples of oceanic mantas with Mauricio Hoyos, one of Mexico's leading shark scientists. Interestingly, we were taking the manta tissue samples to see whether diver presence was causing them stress. This can be done by looking at levels of stress hormone present in the tissues at the beginning of the season when very few divers are around, versus at the peak of the season when diver presence is ubiquitous. Dora runs loads of these citizen science trips, and in my opinion, this model of tourism is the future. Also, this place has been a dream diving destination of mine for years, so I was so stoked that I could visit it for research purposes. Another group I joined for shark conservation was the Rodney Fox Shark Expeditions in Southern Australia. I worked on the Rodney Fox boat as a cage captain and crew for 4 separate trips to the Neptune Islands to cage dive with the great white sharks. It was so much fun to actually work on the boat and get into the groove with the rest of the crew. I was also lucky enough to be there for the 50th anniversary trip for the documentary of Blue Water White Death, which is the first film to ever capture a great white shark underwater. Rodney Fox himself was on board for this trip, so I got to know him personally, and we had a hilarious time together. This organization actually invented cage diving, which has since become an industry that has been instrumental in transforming the image of sharks, especially great white sharks, from a terror to a joy to see in their natural environment. This shift in perspective has been vital in causing a huge increase in the concern for the well-being of these misunderstood animals. The third facet to my scholarship year was the training I received that greatly increased my diving potential. This started right at the beginning of the year at the DAN headquarters, where Kim and I joined the wonderful Patty Siri to do our Diving First Aid Pro courses. We also spent a great week at their headquarters, learning about so much, from how they operate their 24/7 hotline that is any diver's best friend, to their cutting-edge dive research program. DAN is such an integral part of the diving community, and I felt so lucky to have been able to visit them. I also visited Luke Inman of the Cortez Expeditions. He is a longtime scholarship supporter and invited me to join him for 2 weeks of technical dive training. I did my first dives and doubles, and I learned about proper gas and decompression planning and how to stage and dive with multiple cylinders. I loved this introduction to the world of tech diving, and I left Luke with my PADI 4045 certs and with a standing invitation to come back to La Paz to continue. I will definitely be back there as soon as I can. On the other end of the spectrum, I wanted to try diving with no cylinders at all. Kirk Crack invited me to join the Performance Freediving Academy for a 3-week intensive program in Kona, Hawaii. Ryan Reed, one of their instructors, trained me from an intermediate freediver all the way to a freediving instructor. I love freediving. It is insane how much our bodies are capable of when we practice mindfulness and breath control. I have actually been freediving a lot here in Canada in the cold water. And though it may not be as comfortable as Kona, it is definitely as fulfilling. Finally, and almost on a whim, I visited the headquarters of International Training to do an intensive 10-day SDI scuba instructor course with Jesse Iacono of the training department. Though this course wasn't in my plans at the beginning of the year, I decided I wanted to pursue it to be able to teach students in both the scientific and recreational arenas, and I'm so happy I did. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to share the world of scuba with everyone that I can. I had a wonderful time with the international training team, and I loved making the mental shift from diver to instructor. This brings me to my final goal for the year. As an aspiring scientist, I was hoping to use the platform provided to me by the scholarship to connect with and learn from a wide range of marine scientists. I was hoping I could narrow my focus for the future and also dabble in realms that I had never before considered. As a diver, diving physiology and hyperbaric research has always fascinated me. I actually worked as a dive tender for the hyperbaric chamber at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, with these awesome ladies pictured up here. So it was nostalgic when they invited me back to tend a dive to 60 meters to simulate narcosis. It was great to jump back into that role and learn about the research that they have been doing. I also was able to visit the Catalina Island Hyperbaric Chamber right at the beginning of the year to work with Carl Huggins. We went over chamber operations and the logistics of running a 24/7 volunteer-run chamber for the divers of Southern California. Carl is also one of the people to work on the first decompression models that resulted in the initial recreational diving computers. Being able to speak with him about this right at the beginning of the year gave me a great knowledge base and understanding that I was able to apply to multiple situations during the remainder of my scholarship. Jumping from human to animal hyperbarics, Sean Wolf, the 2017 National Park Service intern of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society, invited me along for a really sweet project on another part of Catalina Island with the Pennington Marine Science Center. They had just built their own recompression/decompression chamber in order to safely collect and keep fish susceptible to barotrauma in their aquarium and for research purposes. We collected fish at depth and then decompressed them, and we also fished from the surface and recompressed them in order to alleviate the dramatic symptoms of barotrauma that you can see up here with this poor fish with his eyeballs sticking out. This was an amazing project, as these issues are a huge challenge to overcome when trying to collect many species of fish. And for such a small research station, it was really cool that they had built one of their own. Crossing over to the other side of the country, I joined the Indiana University Underwater Science team led by Charlie Beaker for a field school in the Florida Keys. We were there to assess the condition and make some 3D models of the San Pedro and San Felipe. These ships are part of a Spanish fleet sunk back in 1733 that are some of the oldest artificial reef sites in North America. Charlie was instrumental in making these archaeologically significant sites into marine protected areas. We did biological and archaeological surveys and took images to create the 3D model of the San Pedro that you can see here. I loved this opportunity to step out of my field, and I learned so much from Charlie, Sam, Kirsten, and the IU team. Continuing with research outside of my realm of expertise, let's jump to the Canadian Arctic. Serendipitously, I was able to join 3 different research groups working in the area, all providing me unique opportunities to learn about polar science. The first of these was Ocean Networks Canada. They are an incredible organization that focuses on making data accessible. They have a network of marine observatories distributed across Canada's coastline that provides a live stream of abiotic data year-round that can be used by literally anyone. This type of selfless scientific collaboration is the future, and I was so stoked to be invited to work with them. We retrieved and updated their observatory here in Iqaluktutiak, Nunavut. Most of their team was engineers, so I loved shifting my thinking from asking biological questions to asking the logistical questions that are necessary for an instrument like this to work in such an extreme environment. One of their instruments, a phytoplankton sampler, I found super cool. One of the limitations of polar marine science is that the sea is covered by ice for most of the year, so regular year-round sampling is impossible. This instrument is set to take a water sample every 2 weeks for the whole year, which would allow scientists to look at planktonic communities year-round. This combination of biology and marine engineering floored me. The Arctic Research Foundation was the second group I worked with here. I joined them for my first research cruise ever. The team was made up of physical and chemical oceanographers as well as biologists. In this area of the Arctic Ocean called the Kitikmeot Sea, there are spots where the ice melts in the winter, making holes of water in an otherwise frozen landscape. This study is trying to understand what parameters dictate why these hotspots are where they are. Understanding this can help comprehend oceanic functioning on a larger scale. From my previous work as a field technician, I was familiar with a lot of the work that they were doing, so I was kept quite busy the whole time. And though I generally enjoy identifying cool ocean critters, I can't say that it stays fun when you are looking down a microscope for hours on end on a swaying boat. I generally am not a seasick person, but man, I definitely got a little nauseous. My final experience in the Arctic was epic because I finally got to get wet. I joined the OceanWise Vancouver Aquarium for their yearly Arctic trip for ecological monitoring and aquarium collections. I love the Van Aqua team. We had an absolute blast together. I also loved diving in the Arctic. There was so much funky life, like this upside down jelly. As expected, the water was very cold. My coldest dive temp read -1.8 degrees Celsius. And just so you know, seawater freezes at -2. Because of this, we had to take multiple precautions to make sure that the diving was safe. We also had to wear orange hoods to make sure we weren't mistaken for seals by hunters when we came up from dives. Even with all the precautions, we had some great dives and collected some really cool creatures like sea spiders and Arctic cod for the aquarium. This next experience I want to talk about was not the most glamorous, but in terms of my interest and future, it was super applicable. I joined a lab in La Paz called the AT-Lab, run by the geneticist Adrian Munguia Vega. He uses environmental DNA to study the ecology of the Gulf of California. Just like you and I shed skin cells into our environments, so does everything else. So eDNA is the DNA matter that can be extracted from an environmental sample, like a scoop of seawater. This relatively new technology is enabling scientists to learn what animals are present where in a way that is minimally intrusive and oftentimes more accurate than other traditional forms of surveying. Its applications are growing, and I was able to learn a lot about the field from my lab mates here. I actually worked with eDNA in the past, and in fact, I'm working with it now. Another group of geneticists I worked with were from the Center of Genomics, Ecology, and Environment from the Universidad Mayor de Santiago in Chile. They are studying Antarctic sponge holobionts in order to understand whether the sponge's role within the ecosystem shifts seasonally. A sponge holobiont is the collective of the sponge with its associated microbes. Together, this community can actually have profound impacts on the surrounding ecosystem through processes like water filtration and nutrient cycling. Understanding these roles can help to predict change as the oceans in these susceptible areas continue to warm. They are using novel genetic techniques like eDNA and transcriptomics to answer their questions, but luckily for me, they still needed divers to get the sponges for them. So I joined their team for a month of sampling on the Shetland Islands, where we collected 3 different subtidal sponge species. I loved working with these guys and diving in such a crazy place. It is a very novel experience to have to avoid ice when surfacing. I have now officially dove in all 7 continents, and it was such a great experience with which to end my year. So, what did I gain? Other than the sweet diving opportunities, of course. Honestly, it was hard to capture the emotions I felt after such a whirlwind of a year. I've experienced so much in such a short period of time. I've traveled extensively, learned so much about diving in the ocean, and addressed the goals I set for myself at the beginning of the year and more. However, when I really think about it, my biggest takeaway from this year has been the personal growth and changes I can see in myself. This scholarship only exists because of the extensive global network that has been built over the past 45 years. Because of this, I have now learned how to interact with people from backgrounds extremely different from my own. I have gained so much confidence in my ability to take care of myself and how to interact productively with the world around me. In our increasingly globalizing world, these skills are invaluable, and I know I will be using them for the rest of my life. I have always been very interested in genomics and its applications to conservation. Working with researchers in this field during the scholarship gave me a sampling of some of the incredible work being done, and I am hoping to collaborate with some of them in the future. This exposure also helped me to decide on my current path. I am now in graduate school at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada, using environmental DNA techniques to assess ecological health. And though a lot of this work is in the lab and on the computer, I still spend as much time as I can underwater. I've been continuing my work as a contract research diver, and I've been instructing freediving as well. I also have progressed with my newfound interest in underwater photography, and of course, I'm looking forward to all the adventures yet to come. Truly though, this scholarship year is made by the people. I have met so many incredible people who are so passionate about the oceans and about what they do. I want to give them my most sincere gratitude. You have changed my life more than you know and inspired me to put as much passion into my own path. I also would like to thank my hosts who have taught me so much, from dive training to scientific expeditions and community projects, to opening their homes for me to stay. The people I have met along the way have been so supportive. Each experience came with unique knowledge and individuals whom undoubtedly have expanded the perception of the world around me. Not many people get such a unique chance of self-discovery so early in life, and for this, I'm eternally grateful. So I would like to finish by thanking the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society for selecting me to represent them. And of course, thanking Rolex for their support. This was an unforgettable ride, and I'm so looking forward to giving back to the future scholars, the society, the diving community, and of course, the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha, for your tremendous presentation. You're definitely right about the incredible people who are so supportive of the Society. We can't thank them enough. Next up, we will hear from Kim Hildebrand, our 2019 European Rolex Scholar.
Hello, my name is Kim Hildebrand. It is great to see so many of you together today, despite the quite different setting online. It is still a pleasure to be able to present to you a bit about my year as the 2019 European Rolex Scholar of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. My scholarship year started in April 2019 and ended a bit abruptly in March 2020. But the 11 months I've had have truly been incredible, and I've made some invaluable experiences in the underwater world, in fields of deep interest to me. All of these wouldn't have been possible without the amazing support of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society and Rolex, as well as the hosts who have had me and the many great sponsors. So first of all, I would like to thank all of you for your generous support throughout the year. Okay, so before I begin to speak about my year as a Rolex Scholar, I would like to start with a little summary of who I am, where I come from, and most importantly, what has sparked my great fascination for the ocean. I come from a little town in northern Germany, close to Hamburg, and I have grown up on a little farm where we've had horses and some other animals. So I have felt a deep connection to the natural world, especially animals, early on. When I was 16, I decided to go abroad for a year, and I found a school in New Zealand which offered a program called the Marine Academy, through which the students could learn to scuba dive, and I was immediately hooked. In that year, I experienced the ocean from all its sides. I learned to scuba dive, to free dive, to kayak, to surf, to catch my own seafood and fish. I was deeply fascinated by the amazing marine wildlife, which lived pretty much right at my doorstep. Nevertheless, in the school subject Marine Sciences, I also learned which threats these animals face with growing anthropogenic impact on the oceans. That also led me to get trained as a marine mammal medic through New Zealand's Whale Stranding Response Organization Project Jonah, which you can see on some of these pictures. So ever since that year, I had dreamed of giving back to the ocean in some way in the future because it had given me so much in that time. So when I finished high school, my childhood dream of becoming a veterinarian became reality when I was accepted into the University of Veterinary Medicine in Hanover. Here, I learned about the anatomy, physiology, medicine, and health management of domestic farm animals and companion animals. I loved learning about all of this, but I was missing something. My passion for wild animals and my concern for their health was still strong, and I was eager to learn also about them. In 2019, I then went abroad again to study at the veterinary faculty of the University of Lisbon in Portugal. I wanted to learn a new language and get to know a foreign culture, but also I hoped to reconnect with the ocean. So when a fatally stranded common dolphin came into the faculty's pathology department, I was also right there to help. In November that year, I then went to a conference on wildlife and conservation medicine, and I got really inspired by the stories and work of the presenting wildlife veterinarians. And somewhat, just around that time, I also became aware of the Rolex Scholarship of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. It sounded like the opportunity that I had been waiting for to finally gain practical experience in the field of aquatic wildlife medicine and the conservation of the ocean. Just like wonder, I was accepted into this wonderful program. I'm still incredibly grateful for this opportunity because it really felt like the puzzle piece I was missing to find the connecting points of my veterinary degree with the ocean environment. Speaking about animal health and the environment, I would like to use this opportunity to introduce everybody to the concept, which I firmly believe in and which has also shaped my scholarship year predominantly. It's the concept of One Health. This concept acknowledges that human health is tightly connected to the health of animals and an intact environment. Some of the global issues One Health works to address include environmental contamination, habitat use conflicts, biodiversity loss, emerging infectious diseases, antimicrobial resistance, and ecosystem function degradation. Its mission is that many professionals with a range of expertise who are active in different sectors, such as public health, animal health, plant health, and the environment, should join forces to support One Health approaches. Throughout my scholarship year, I wanted to find out how I could contribute to the One Health approach from a veterinary perspective, focusing on the ocean environments and aquatic animals' health. In order to find my place in this joint effort, I aimed to understand the other sides of the work that contributes to it, the work of not only veterinarians, but also ocean scientists, conservationists, communicators, and of course also the side of the general public from different countries and cultures. So my main goal in the scholarship year was to immerse myself into the field of wildlife and conservation medicine. I wanted to understand how wildlife rescue and rehabilitation centers, as well as aquariums, contribute to wildlife conservation, as well as to learn important clinical and husbandry skills in aquatic species. By assisting in marine science on megafauna, I wanted to study and understand aquatic organisms as well as their ocean environment and the effects humans have on both. I also aimed to build effective science communication and public outreach techniques, and explore how this can influence the public's understanding and support in conservation efforts. Of course, I also wanted to improve my diving proficiency, to be able to explore and study different ocean environments safely. And lastly, I wish to find out how aquariums and responsible dive and nature tourism can help in inspiring a wider public as well. My year in summary were more than 200 dives on 7 continents. One of these dives even took place between 2 tectonical plates of the continents in Iceland, actually. And I've been to 16 countries. The range of latitudes was 68 degrees south to 63 degrees north, which was pretty impressive. Okay. So first of all, I would like to tell you a little bit about my experiences I made in wildlife and conservation medicine. I start off with the Maldives because in July 2019, I got the chance to do a 2-week veterinary externship at the Sea Turtle Rescue Center of the Olive Ridley Project. This was one of my key experiences, which taught me valuable knowledge and practical skills in the field of sea turtle medicine and highlighted the junction of the veterinary profession to conservation of endangered species. Under the mentorship of resident wildlife veterinarian Dr. Jackie Reed, I got hands-on experience in wound treatment, injections, blood draws, and analysis under the microscope, taking X-rays, and even to conduct physiotherapy on the turtles. The most inspiring part for me were the physiotherapy sessions with one of our smaller patients, who had to have one flipper amputated due to entanglement and discarded fishing gear, and who still suffered from the buoyancy syndrome. This condition didn't allow him to dive deep. For this reason, we took him into the ocean with us, so he could practice diving. Being in the ocean environment gave him a great portion of encouragement, and therefore we could see him improve every session. Another task at the center was the monitoring of sea turtle nests. We did night shifts to oversee hatchings, and on the next day, we took data on the number of hatched, underdeveloped, or non-fertilized eggs. I also gained experience in outreach and science communication by speaking to the daily visitors to the rescue center, by organizing theme days, and giving informative presentations. In late August, I then went to Iceland because I was invited to the world's first beluga whale sanctuary, managed by the Sea Life Trust on the Westman Islands in South Iceland. This open water sanctuary provides a new home for 2 beluga whales who had been living in a marine park in Shanghai for many years before. So when I came to Iceland, I was taken under the wing of the main curator, Trisha Kamolnik, who had worked as a caretaker and researcher with the US Navy Marine Mammal Program for decades. I benefited a lot from her experience and knowledge. I got to observe the daily care and the training of medical behaviors, which are the basis for enabling low-stress veterinary interventions for both the animal and the vet if needed. I learned a lot about beluga behavior, curating, training, and health checks. One day, when the veterinarian Dr. Greenwood visited the center to conduct health checks, I was able to assist him and hear things from a veterinary perspective as well. As the Westman Islands are also home to the world's largest puffin colony, the center also houses a puffin rescue center. Lucky enough, my stay there coincided with the annual puffling season, which is when the young pufflings fly out from their nests to the sea. As some of them accidentally crash into the village's streets instead, the islanders have established a traditional community effort called the Puffling Patrol. This means that the whole village, including children, patrols at night to catch lost pufflings. I help with the annual pufflings count by weighing, measuring, and examining the health of hundreds of pufflings, collecting vital data about the annual breeding success of the population. I also learned how to wash oiled birds, allowing them to regain waterproofness. An amazing hands-on experience where I was given quite some responsibility, running the puffling count of several hundreds birds a day by myself some days. The most precious moment in the end was the release of the pufflings at the island's cliffs, waving them goodbye on their long journey. Another experience of great value to me was the externship at the Alaska Sea Life Center, who run an outstanding wildlife rescue program for all kinds of Alaskan marine species. I was working with 2 sea otters who had been rescued by ASLC as orphaned pups. Because they couldn't be reintroduced to the wild, a new home was found for them in an aquarium in Europe, where they would be ambassadors for their highly endangered wild fellow members of their species. But because sea otters tend to stress a lot about new situations, I was assigned a project to monitor the pre-transportation acclimation of them to their transport kennels and the time zone shift. I monitored them for indicators of stress, such as changes in body core temperatures. I was able to record these temperatures remotely through very high frequency radio transmitters, which had been implanted surgically into the otter's peritoneal cavity beforehand, which you can see on the right here. We also monitored their behavior and reactions to other stimuli which we introduced. We tried different means of enrichment, such as clamsicles, which is clams in ice cubes. They loved them. And we stimulated the grooming of their fur, which is a vital behavior to keep their fur waterproof and their core temperature stable. We also tested the response of the otters to different floor systems to improve hygiene and again to stabilize the thermoregulation. And of course, the otter's comfort, which you can see on the left here. In the end, I developed graphs and drew conclusions from my findings by comparing them to other papers about sea otter thermoregulation. Besides working on the otter project, I got to follow Dr. Gertz, the Director of Animal Health, around in different other veterinary tasks around the aquarium exhibits. We undertook ultrasound pregnancy checks on Steller sea lions, conducted health exams on seabirds, sea otters, and pinnipeds, or did laboratory assessment of blood or water samples. At ASLC, I also met Marcus Horning, a world-renowned marine mammal researcher. I was able to learn about different tech technologies as means for wildlife research from him. And he taught me how to build tags and retrieve data from them. Lastly, I also occasionally helped the ASLC's dive team cleaning the exhibit's windows, and thereby got to experience Alaskan marine life underwater as well, when the seals were observing me cleaning their habitat, which you can see on the right here. Another highlight were some beautiful open water dives in Resurrection Bay. The next stop was in California because in October 2019, I was invited to the Marine Mammal Center, which is the world's largest marine mammal hospital. I was incredibly inspired by their work. STMMC combines the fields of medicine, research, and education outstandingly in order to advance marine mammal and ocean conservation. While my stay there, I assisted the center's medical director, Dr. Kara Field, in health exams and clinical procedures on California sea lions and even an olive ridley turtle. We took X-rays, did endoscopy of the gastrointestinal tract, and my highlight was when I was able to practice drawing of blood and cerebrospinal fluid on a sea lion. I also got to join the pathology team around Chief Pathologist Dr. Duane in some necropsies on sea lions and harbor purposes. Besides these daily medical tasks, I also spoke to the education department about their collaboration with schools and to the rescue team who received calls on sick marine mammals and organized the rescue, coordinating a big number of volunteers. In general, TMMC had been a must-go destination for me because of their internationally high standing in marine mammal medicine and because they offer many opportunities, such as vet fellowships and internships, externships for vet students, and research opportunities. Therefore, having made this contact could hopefully be very valuable for me for future opportunities as well. The second objective in my scholarship year was to contribute to research on marine fauna. One of my favorite research experiences was when I got to assist Arina Favilla in her PhD project at the Costa Lab of the University of California, Santa Cruz. Arina had previously attended a tech technology workshop given by Marcus Horning, who I had already met as well, and she used these technologies for her research on northern elephant seals. I got to assist her in a translocation experiment through which she wanted to collect data on thermoregulation and deep diving physiology of the seals. For this, we picked up a juvenile elephant seal from the Año Nuevo State Park, home to the world's largest breeding colony on the mainland. At the lab, we then took 3D photogrammetry shots of its body and attached several instruments to it. This involved heat flux biologgers for measuring temperature exchange between the animal's skin and the water, satellite tags for location tracking and the recording of diving behavior, and thermistors measuring the temperature and therefore blood perfusion in blubber layers of different depths. The latter was a sterile procedure guided by ultrasound, which I was able to assist with. We then translocated the seal to the opposite side of Monterey Bay and followed its path via the Argus satellite. All in all, this was a great opportunity for me to learn about the use of tag technology in wildlife research and what it would be like doing a PhD on marine wildlife. Another interesting research experience of mine was when I got to work with the marine biology team of the Maldives Underwater Initiative, including 2 manta trust researchers. I went there primarily to learn about the underwater ultrasound pregnancy checks on reef manta rays, which had been recorded here for the first time ever in the world. I wanted to learn how these scans could help in manta ray conservation by shining light on the reproduction and population health of manta rays. From the data retrieved, key breeding areas could be determined, which could then help with setting up marine protected areas in important areas. I got to join in on several manta survey dives at the local cleaning stations, where we took ID shots of the mantas and added them to the database. But we unfortunately did not find a manta ray calm enough for us to approach it for an ultrasound scan. In August, I then spent a week with the Maldives Whale Shark Research Program, while their daily field work in the South Ari Marine Protected Area, which is an area of all year-round whale shark abundance. Together with the MWSRP staff and volunteers, I conducted whale shark surveys by freediving. We captured photo ID shots and documented length, sex, behavior, and injuries of the sharks. We also documented environmental data as well as the number and behavior of boats and snorkelers around to see if they were obeying the rules of the MPA. In the evenings, we then entered the data and ID shots to the database to identify the sharks we had seen. One day, I also helped the MWSRP in outreach and educational activities at a festival for school children from the neighboring islands to make them aware about the preciousness of their local marine environment. One of the first goals of mine at the beginning of my scholarship year was to improve my own diving proficiency. I also wanted to be able to give more people the opportunity to experience the precious marine world themselves in the future. So it was clear for me that I would want to become a dive master and a scuba instructor throughout the year too. In June 2019, I started my dive master training at Dive Shack Malta with PADI course director Marcus Kitching-Hove. Dive Shack is a very busy dive center, which meant that I was able to assist in many different courses, such as Discover Scuba Diving, Open Water, Advanced, and Rescue Diver courses. I also got to guide dives by myself and learned about the everyday operation of a dive shop in general. As Malta, in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, is known as a real wreck diving paradise, it was also a highlight for me that I got to dive 5 of the impressive wrecks while my internship there. Subsequently, I did a GOE fundamentals course with John Kendall through DiveWise and TechWise Malta. John was a brilliant instructor who demonstrated a lot of patience, empathy, and encouragement throughout the course. It was the first time for me diving in a twin set, with a wing and a GOE technical equipment configuration. And I still hadn't had a huge amount of experience in a dry suit either. But because John was so patient, and despite the many challenges, in the end, I developed much better buoyancy and trim and improved my fin kicks a lot. I learned how to perform S-drills, valve drills, and rescues with the twin set. In November, I finally felt that I was ready to take on even more responsibility with diving students. So I started my instructor development course with Luke Inman at Cortez Expeditions in Mexico. It was an intense 10-day course where I learned to demonstrate and teach in-water and surface skills, to recognize and correct students' mistakes, and to give theoretical presentations. Us instructor candidates quickly became a great team and encouraged each other a lot, so it was a really rewarding course. And I'm proud to say that I'm now a PADI open water scuba instructor. The last course I took in my scholarship year was a GUE cave diver course with the experienced cave diving instructor Kelvin Davidson. First, we brushed up all skills from the GUE fundamentals class before we then learned laying lines in caverns and basic cave dive planning. The course was highly focused on responsible teamwork, which I enjoyed very much. It got more and more complex as Kelvin simulated all kinds of equipment failure scenarios for us, which we had to solve as a team. We also practiced lost diver and lost line, as well as zero visibility scenarios. All in all, this course was also very rewarding, despite the challenges, because in the end, we could enjoy the very beautiful Mexican cave environment safely. Another goal I had for my scholarship year was to build effective science communication and public outreach techniques. For this reason, I wanted to improve my underwater media skills next. So at the beginning of the year, I sought help from experienced underwater photographers. First, I visited the Red Sea Diving Safari Photo Camp in Egypt, where Paul Duxfield and Phil Metcalf gave me a very personal introduction to underwater photography. Directly afterwards, I was invited by Alex Mustard to attend 2 of his photography workshops in the Northern Red Sea. Alex was an outstanding teacher who happily shared his world-class knowledge in both photography and also marine biology. He ran an intense course schedule with about 4 dives a day and many lectures. Topics included fish portraits, wreck photography, and fish school photography. Alex also gave us a lot of advice on image processing and editing. The intense exposure to photography and diving within these weeks really helped me to improve my technical photography skills, to think about compositions, as well as stories which I would want to share with the viewers of the photos. It was also great to feel a sense of community amongst all the photographers, as the other more experienced participants were always happy to help and to exchange ideas and tips with everyone. These are just some impressions of the photos I took while these trips. Furthermore, throughout the scholarship year, I also aim to find out how aquariums and responsible dive and nature tourism can help in inspiring people to appreciate and hopefully help protect our ocean environment. So followingly, I would like to share with you some of the experiences I made with companies who combine tourism with research and conservation. In the beginning of the year, I was able to join cetacean watching Azores on the small island Pico in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, which is where 28 species of whales and dolphins pass on their migrations or even live here year-round, such as the sperm whales. I came to help in their whale watching trips and cetacean population research. I also learned about the Azorean history regarding cetaceans. Traditionally, whaling had been an integral part in the life of many Azoreans throughout the 19th century and up until 1986. Nowadays, luckily, the Azoreans really benefit from the vibrant whale watching industry instead. This was a great example that an intact ocean environment and wildlife populations provide a way more sustainable income than harvesting the oceans. In January 2020, I went to Fiji because I was invited by Benga Adventure Divers, which is a responsible shark diving business, who are committed to shark conservation and research as well. They have established a marine protected area called Shark Reef Marine Reserve, where the guests are able to experience 6 species of shark and about 40 bull sharks around at the same time. That was an amazing experience for sure. Through their dive services and an Adopt a Shark project, they are able to fund research projects. I was actually lucky enough to be in Fiji at the same time as Dr. Jörg Brunschweiler and Kerstin Glaus, Swiss shark researchers who had conducted several different studies on the Fijian bull shark populations in the last years, all in collaboration with BAD. Kerstin told me about her current research project on juvenile bull sharks in Fijian rivers, which is where they are born, which helps to understand the bull shark's life cycle better and to determine more areas which would need protection. Lastly, in March 2020, a dream of mine came true. I got to go and even dive in Antarctica, South Georgia and the Falkland Islands on an ocean-wide expedition. This was truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me, allowing me to experience the marvelous marine and terrestrial landscapes and fauna of these remote places. I got to see 7 out of the 8 Antarctic penguin species, as well as 5 different seal species and numerous cetacean and bird species. I joined the dive team leader, Michael Green, to learn about the specifics of dive operations in polar regions and gained a lot of cold water diving experience myself. I got to dive on icebergs and in water colder than 0-degree water. But as a highlight, I was also part of the first dive group who have ever dived at the historically famous Point Wild on Elephant Island, which is where part of Shackleton's crew sought refuge on his endurance expedition in 1960. When not diving, I was taught a lot about polar fauna, geography, and history as well in the excellent and comprehensive lecture program on board. Speaking to the expedition leader, guides, and guests throughout the trip, I found out about the impact it can have on people witnessing the amazing polar wildlife firsthand and learning about the ever-growing human-made threats to this environment. I recognized firsthand that it sparks immense awareness in the visitors and that they take important messages home with them, which they are inspired to spread further as well. So after having made all these amazing experiences, it is actually incredibly difficult for me to put into worthy words how much this scholarship year has gifted to me. I have gained such a great amount of new knowledge and skills in so many different areas. And I have met so many amazingly supportive people with fascinating life stories who have inspired me, given me invaluable advice, and sparked ideas for the future. I have definitely also found an entirely new kind of motivation for my degree of veterinary medicine. For this reason, since the end of my scholarship year in April 2020, I have continued my degree at the University of Veterinary Medicine in Hanover. Having been able to apply the broad knowledge I gained in the scholarship year to the contents of my degree has helped me greatly in understanding the links between human, animal, and environmental health. As of this summer, I will start off into the final clinical year, in which I will have the opportunity to explore perspectives for the future in even more depth. In 2022, I hope to be able to go abroad for externships in the areas of wildlife and conservation medicine and wildlife research. As the scholarship year has definitely strengthened my aspirations to contribute to marine wildlife and ocean health specifically, I'm currently in contact with the Marine Mammal Center hoping to be able to return for a longer externship with them next year. I would also like to explore perspectives in the field of zoonosis research, which are infectious diseases that can be transmitted between humans and wildlife animals, such as SARS-CoV-2, for example. Given the reality of climate change and habitat loss, zoonoses pose an increasing problem, and I hope to find out more about the interconnections between the health of humans, wildlife animals, and the environment in the future. I am for sure really excited and curious about what the future will bring. So in the end, once more, there's to say that all this would have not been possible without the incredible support of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society and Rolex. I don't have the words to express the amount of gratitude I feel for having been given this life-changing opportunity. It has been a huge honor to represent OWUSS this past year and to have been accepted into a family of such dedicated and inspiring ocean enthusiasts. I'm also beyond grateful to all the amazing hosts who have had me. Thank you so much for having shared your incredible passion, knowledge, and experience with me, and for teaching me your specialty within the underwater field. Your generosity truly leaves me with a strong desire to give back in every way I can, especially to future generations as well. Of course, a huge thank you also goes to the generous dive and photography gear sponsors: Fourth Element, Halcyon, Real Diving, Reef Photo and Video, Nauticam, Paralens, Light and Motion, Sunto, and also organizations which have sponsored training or insurance to me, such as PUDI, Global Underwater Explorers, and Divers Alert Network. You have made diving and documenting some very incredible places possible for me. Also, I would like to thank everybody who has taken their time today to follow the little stories of our scholarship years. I really hope I could give you an enjoyable impression of my experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, for your amazing presentation. We wish you nothing but success as you continue your work to become a veterinarian. Our final presenter today is Joanna Smart, our 2019 Australasian Rolex Scholar.
Hello, my name is Joanna Smart and I'm the 2019 Australasian Rolex Scholar of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. Thank you for joining me today online from wherever you are in the world. I hope you enjoy this journey under the sea with me. My scholarship journey began in 2019 when I was selected as the Australasian Rolex Scholar of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. I would like to start this presentation by thanking the many sponsors and hosts for making this experience possible. I'd like to thank Rolex for their support of the Scholarship Society. I would also like to thank the equipment sponsors that I received during my scholarship year: TUSA, Waterproof, Reef Photo and Video, Paralens, and Light and Motion. So a little bit about my background. I started snorkeling when I was very young. I was lucky to have parents that were really interested in the marine environment, and they got me excited about all things underwater. I went on to gain all the scuba certificates I could possibly get for that age, and then I went to study marine and Antarctic science at the University of Tasmania. Since then, I've had a number of jobs, specifically working in environmental consulting, sampling marine environments and doing environmental impact assessments. So I'm from Tasmania. It's the little island state at the bottom of Australia. We're on a similar latitude to New Zealand and would probably have temperatures close to Oregon or the United Kingdom. Tasmania is famous for apples, produce, and its natural environment. So here are some examples of what you might see around Tasmania. On the left, we have a very cute wombat, which is one of our marsupials that live on the island. We also have a number of kelp forests, which I was lucky enough to grow up snorkeling in. However, these have disappeared over the last 20 years thanks to climate change. I themed my scholarship year around a question. What do we want the oceans to look like in 20 years? And specifically, what do we need to do now to get there? To answer this question, I divided my scholarship into 3 different experience categories. Firstly was innovation. I wanted to work with organisations who were at the forefront of innovation and technology underwater. I truly believe that if we want to conserve our environment moving forward, we need to invent innovative technologies to do so. My other theme was education. I wanted to learn from organisations who were studying the future of our oceans and working to communicate this message to the broader public. My third category was dive training. I wanted to expand upon my dive training and learn new ways of exploring underwater. The first focus of this presentation will be the experiences I had dive training. I was lucky enough to have a host of amazing sponsors who helped me with this area. Throughout the year, I was able to gain a number of different qualifications, including the Ocean Reef Full Face Mask Diver. I completed my GUE fundamentals with a technical pass with the Dive Centre Bondi in Sydney. And I did this on twin tanks, which was my first experience diving in twin tanks, and I really enjoyed it. I conducted a bunch of different 3D photogrammetry courses, both in Scotland, with the Major Projects Foundation in Australia, run by past Australasian scholar Matt Carter, and with Pete Mesley in New Zealand. I also completed my PADI Advanced Rebreather course with Pete Mesley in New Zealand of Lust for Us Diving with the assistance of Dive Tutakaka. And then I completed my Gates STO course, learning how to operate a Gates underwater housing with Peter Lighthowler here in Australia. At the end of my year, I also completed my Coxswain 1 boat driving course. One of the highlights of my training experiences was completing my PADI Advanced Rebreather in the Poor Nights in New Zealand. I was incredibly lucky to have Pete Mesley as my instructor, and his passion and enthusiasm for diving was infectious. The Poor Nights were an amazing playground to learn this new type of diving, and I really enjoyed seeing the environment there. It was very similar to what we have here in Tasmania, but with a bit of a tropical twist. So it was exciting to see those more tropical species like turtles that occasionally turn up on the islands. The other great benefit of learning to dive on the rebreather was how close and personal you could get with wildlife. Here's a photo of Pete with a moray eel that I took while I was there. We even had some bronze whaler sharks come and visit us while we were diving, as well as a whole host of other marine life. And I really enjoyed playing with my camera and getting really up close and personal to so many different species. The next category I had as part of my scholarship year was education and a future ocean. And I really sought out experiences that focused on thinking about what our oceans will look like in the future and how we can preserve them, but also how we communicate what our oceans currently look like to the broader community. I was lucky enough to go on assignment with National Geographic. I was invited to Lady Elliot Island with David Dubélé and Jennifer Hayes. I spent some time with Benga Adventure Divers in Fiji, learning about their shark education program. And I also spent some time with Rodney Fox Expeditions in South Australia, diving with the great white sharks, which was an amazing experience. I'd never seen a great white shark before, but also to see how their organisation connects community and individuals with the great white sharks and teaches them so much about their ecology, their habitat, their feeding patterns, and so many other things. I went to the University of Southern California Wrigley Institute and Hyperbaric Chamber with Carl Huggins and got to operate a hyperbaric chamber for the first time. And I joined Mahoney and Nadari in Papua New Guinea, which is a community education organisation run by Max and Cecily Benjamin of Wilindi Plantation Resort. And they've been responsible for educating thousands of school children about the surrounding reef environment. I joined Monterey Bay Aquarium and fulfilled a lifelong dream of becoming an aquarium exhibit for the day. And I also visited the University of Western Australia in Perth and assisted in some of their reef research programs, which look at conserving and regenerating seaweed reefs into the future. In particular, a really standout experience was my time with National Geographic. So David Doublé and Jennifer Hayes were possibly the most incredible mentors I could have asked for in this realm. They have had amazing careers underwater, teaching, educating, writing, photographing the underwater world, and are now leading campaigners for marine conservation. They were on Lady Elliot Island to document the reefs, and they were running a program looking at what the reefs looked like when they photographed them in the 1990s, comparing them to what they looked like now. And we were incredibly lucky with Lady Elliot, because Lady Elliot Island is one of the few places on the Great Barrier Reef that is still in near pristine condition. So the life there was absolutely incredible. Turtles, manta rays, massive schools of fish. I was just in awe when I was underwater. And one of the other huge benefits of being a Lady Elliot was there was a large group of college students visiting from the US, which you can see in the photo in the bottom right. And we were able to talk to and engage with these college students, I think they were from somewhere in Georgia, about the reef, and they were there learning about coral reefs and marine science. A couple of them even got to complete their dive tickets while they were there. So being able to watch David and Jen engage with these students and get them really excited about the future of marine conservation was an amazing experience to be part of. But also advancing my underwater photography skills was something that I really valued. David and Jen are possibly the best mentors you could have in this field, and spending so much time with them underwater, learning how to better use my camera, but also how to better tell a story. And one of the major things I learned from David and Jen is that communicating what goes on underwater is not so much a science, it's an art form. It requires creativity and also being to identify a story that will really pull at the heartstrings of the people that are reading. So one of my favorite photos I got while I was down there was, this is David on the right with a loggerhead turtle that was possibly the biggest turtle I have ever seen. And I spent my evenings snorkeling around the lagoons, and the turtles there were just some of the friendliest I've ever come across. So my time on Lady Elliot was very fundamental in my scholarship year, being able to learn early on how to effectively communicate the stories that I was seeing. The part of my scholarship that changed the way I think about our world underwater was definitely when I visited these innovative businesses. So I spent some time with Tritonia Scientific in Scotland, with Nemo's Garden in Italy, with Ocean Rainforest in the Faroe Islands, and with Blue Latitudes in California. All of these businesses are at the forefront of innovation underwater, and in particular developing systems that will ensure that our oceans into the future remain the best that they can be. I was also lucky enough to be invited to the Sustainable Oceans Alliance Youth Summit in Oslo, which brought together 99 youth leaders from around the world. We spent about 4 days in various workshops looking at different ways that we could conserve the ocean for future generations. And one of the other highlights of the innovation section of my scholarship was visiting the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, where I got to head out on one of their vessels with an ROV. I've always been fascinated by ROVs and deep ocean technology, and we sent them down on some dives to do some filming. And whilst they're at 400 meters deep, we actually got the 2 RVs to fist bump, which was really cool. And I did get to pilot one of the ROVs. So seeing the sort of technology that's available to explore deep ocean depths was absolutely amazing. So one of the first major stops of my scholarship year was visiting Tritonia Scientific in Scotland. And Tritonia Scientific is a scientific diving agency and hyperbaric therapy provider. And they provide a whole bunch of different services to scientists, to divers, to aquaculture, basically to whoever needs work done underwater. And whilst I was there, they also showed me their hyperbaric chamber, which they operate, and it's one of the only ones on the western coast of Scotland. I was able to participate in a variety of different projects, including assessments of kelp detritus that was going into some blue carbon studies, as well as testing the iodine levels around kelp, which is what the diver on the left is doing, collecting some syringes of water. And I really adored Scotland. I think coming from Tasmania, it was possibly very similar to home, but also I'd never been at a place where the diving centre was based next to a 13th century castle. I was able to practice my photography skills in the Scottish lochs, and they were nice and brown. The visibility was quite low, but it was really exciting diving. There were so many creatures and critters. And whilst I was there, I really thought I'd solved one of the great mysteries of the world, and that I'd actually found the Loch Ness Monster, because we were diving just near the sort of where Loch Ness flows into the sea. And I got really excited. I was telling everyone I've found the Loch Ness Monster, I've solved the mystery, only to be informed that it was actually just a really large conger eel. So I was a little bit let down, but it was still really cool to see. And the marine life in the Scottish lochs never ceased to amaze me. Here's a really, really large, what we would call in Australia a crayfish, but I guess this is probably a lobster from that part of the world. And it was only after I took this photo that occurred to me that I didn't really know how strong those claws were. But the other major benefit of traveling to Scotland, but also all of the incredible places that I traveled to throughout my scholarship year, was the above land portion. So traveling out to Glencoe, staying in the Scottish Highlands, just sort of blew me away. I would spend my weekends either diving or checking out the mountains. And I cannot thank my hosts with Tritonia Scientific enough. They are really pushing the boundaries of what is possible for a diving business to achieve. And it was a real eye-opener to see business, science and diving combine with such passion and enthusiasm. From Scotland, I then headed to Italy for one of the most unique projects I've probably ever come across. Nemo's Garden is run by Ocean Reef. Ocean Reef are a manufacturer of scuba diving equipment based in Genoa in Italy. They also have a base in California. And it's essentially an experiment in underwater farming. So what you see in the picture are 6 domes. These domes are made of like a clear acrylic, and inside of them is actually filled with water. So you can stand on the small platforms that are suspended under the domes and poke your head up. It's sort of, if you imagine an inverted cup underwater, and they're filled with air. And inside the domes is a big spiraling hydroponic system. And in the spiraling hydroponic system, they're actually growing plants. So here's a photo taken from the outside of the dome, looking to the inside of the dome, where Gianni is making some records of the basil that they're growing. So they grow a whole range of species, from basil, lettuce, strawberries, tomatoes, all different kinds of herbs. Whilst I was there, they even had some orchids. And if you want to think about innovation underwater, this group is doing it in droves. The purpose of the underwater vegetable farm started off as a bit of an experiment, but they also, and they're currently working with the European Space Agency, doing some experiments on growing vegetables in extreme environments. The other reason this sort of farming could be useful is for places that don't have any arable land. So places that might be sand atolls, or in a future climate might be too dry to grow vegetables, potentially could be done in these domes. The domes are self-sustaining, so they actually generate their own water through condensation. They have a small fan in them that keeps the air circulating, and they are powered by solar and wind power from the surface. So the other huge benefit of Nemo's Garden is the technological advances they're making in using equipment underwater. You can actually get Wi-Fi inside the domes. So you could bring your phone down in a waterproof case, open it up and make a phone inside the garden. So it was just an incredible experience to see what is possible when you actually think outside the box and do something a little bit differently. The garden also acts as a refuge for many, many different kinds of marine life. And these are just some examples of what I saw when I was down there. Big schools of fish, amberjacks, cuttlefish, seahorses, octopus all call the garden home. So not only is it a place to grow terrestrial plants underwater, but it is acting somewhat as an artificial reef as well. So spending time at Nemo's garden was amazing. I learnt to dive on a full face mask. We used the communication systems to talk to each other while we were down there. And I cannot thank Ocean Reef and my hosts in Italy enough for having me, because it really expanded my thinking and really encouraged me to think about the world a little bit differently. Continuing on the theme of underwater farming, I headed to ocean rainforest in the Faroe Islands. For those of you that aren't sure, the Faroe Islands sit about halfway between Iceland and Norway. So they're one of the windiest places on Earth. In that photo on the right, the wind was actually about 60 knots, and there's a large waterfall that goes down the cliff nearby, and it was actually blowing backwards up the cliff. Ocean rainforest is a seaweed farm. So they farm mainly kelps, but a whole bunch of different species in the fjords in the Faroes. And they're thinking about seaweed farming a little bit differently as well. So they are testing a whole bunch of different systems, including offshore farming, which needs to be able to withstand the strength of the Faroese winds. But they also look at the farming process from seeding right through to harvest and production. So the photo on the bottom there is some seaweed gametophytes getting ready to be planted on the strings that they have out in the water. And the top photo is some harvested seaweed. They're also experimenting with different harvesting technologies, inventing their own harvesting systems. And what I really enjoyed about my time at Ocean Rainforest was seeing the seaweed production from start right through to finish. And a bit as a seaweed nerd, I really enjoyed learning about that process. Whilst I was there, they were experimenting with ensiling the seaweed, so actually fermenting it. This can be beneficial to cows and cattle, as it can reduce their methane production if fed to them as part of their feed. And we also dried the seaweeds to be exported to various different places. And not only were the Faroes an amazing place in terms of natural, the seaweed farming, but also their natural beauty. So I've never been to a place that was so rugged, so wild, and so windy. And so thank you to Oliver Gregerson and his team at Ocean Rainforest for having me. I really learnt so much about not only the benefits of underwater farming, but the benefits of developing new technology to farm and to undertake these processes. The other team that's really thinking about the world a little bit differently is the Blue Latitudes Foundation. So I spent some time with Amber and Emily in San Diego to learn all about what they do. And Blue Latitudes is a marine environmental consultancy, and they are mainly focused on the Rigs to Reef program, which is converting disused oil rigs into artificial reefs. So a number of oil rigs off the Californian coastline are due to be decommissioned in the coming years. However, a lot of these structures have been in the water for more than 60 years. So they're actually encrusted with life, and working out what to do with them is quite a challenge. Do you leave them in the water? Do you pull them out? So Amber and Emily of Blue Latitudes consult with large oil and gas companies about the best ecological outcomes for their artificial reefs. And seeing what they believe women can do in science was incredible. They were passionate, driven, confident. So spending time with them, I think, really rubbed off on me and helped me look at the world in a different way. I think overall, the values of our World Underwater Society scholarship is hard to put into words. Throughout the scholarship, I think I met so many amazing people all over the world. And one of the key things I learned was that no matter where you go, there's always someone that's working to conserve and look after the marine environment. And that in itself gave me so much hope for the future. The Our World Underwater Scholarship Society network is incredible. I think basically everywhere I went, there was a scholar host, someone willing to go out for lunch or catch up or just check up on me. And being invited into this network and being a part of the Scholarship Society will not only be beneficial throughout my scholarship year, but also into the future. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Scholarship Society wherever possible. It was also an incredible opportunity for career advancement. I think it sort of distilled about 10 years worth of experience into one. I met so many people, did so many things, got so many qualifications that I would not have been otherwise able to get. And I think particularly the work in photography and video I did, I'm really grateful for. I was able to learn how to use complex camera systems, learn how to communicate stories in a way that I just would not have had the opportunity to do otherwise. I also think that the personal growth and development opportunities are something I could not have achieved without the scholarship. Before the scholarship, I'd never taken a long haul international flight. And I think by the end, I'd taken more than 10. I'd never been outside of the Asia Pacific region. And I've now covered 16 countries across all corners of the globe. And I think I came out of the scholarship a much more confident person, willing to tackle problems head on. When you sort of fly halfway around the world and knock on a stranger's door and ask to stay for 3 weeks, it really changes your perception of what is possible from within yourself. So the value of the scholarship, it will keep on giving for the rest of my life. And not only that, I got to meet so many amazing people across so many different countries and also experience so many amazing marine environments. This photo of a seal was taken in California off Anacapa Island. And this photo of cuttlefish was taken in Papua New Guinea. So continuing to develop my photography skills is something I'm very passionate about. So the scholarship came to a somewhat abrupt end thanks to COVID. I'm very grateful that I got what I got out of it before COVID hit. Since then, I've been working on a number of different projects. I'm back in Tasmania, working for a local environmental consultancy, which has been really interesting. We work on a variety of different projects, including aquaculture, marine development proposals. Anytime anyone wants to put anything in the water, we're there to do an environmental assessment. I've also been undertaking some technical dive training, which has been really exciting. So I completed my advanced nitrox certification, my decompression procedures, and my extended range. So we've been heading down to 55 or 60 metres off the Tasmanian coast and looking at some of the deep water sponge gardens that we have here. And I've really enjoyed undertaking this training. The scholarship set me up so well to launch straight into these courses when I finished. In terms of future directions, I'd like to continue to develop my photo and video skills. That was part of the scholarship that I really enjoyed. I'm also looking into undertaking a master's in quantitative biology and statistics, hopefully starting in the next couple of months. And I'd like to continue to work at the point where science and business intersect. So we need to sort of progress into a world where our businesses are more aware of our science and our scientists are more aware of what the needs of business are. And I'd also like to continue my technical diving because I'm really enjoying exploring these deeper marine environments. So that brings my presentation to a conclusion. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out with any questions you might have about any of the projects that I've been involved with. And I'd also like to send out another massive thank you to all of the people that looked after me during my scholarship year, that took me in, shared their homes with me, shared their knowledge, and basically gave me the experience of a lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. It has been great to hear what you, Neha, and Kim did during your scholarship years, as well as what you've been up to since. Of course, we look forward to watching your careers continue to grow in the coming years. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for day one of our virtual event series. Tomorrow, we will have our Intern Symposium, where you will hear from our 5 returning 2019 interns. Until then, please check out our program book. It has more information about the scholars and interns, as well as the Society as a whole. The program book can be found on the homepage of our website at owuscholarship.org. Thank you. See you tomorrow.